Well, hello, my friends. How's it going? Welcome to D4, D&D Deep Dive. This is the show where each week we take a deep dive into one, sometimes two, specific character builds for Dungeons & Dragons. We crunch numbers about them, we theorycraft about them, not so that I can tell you the right way or the best way to play a certain character, but to explore one potential way to build and play a character in D&D with the hopes of creating something that is both really fun, primarily, but also really powerful. So, if you enjoy creating characters for Dungeons & Dragons, almost as much as you enjoy playing the actual game itself, or if you're just looking for tips or ideas on a character that you're thinking about making, then welcome home. This is where you belong, and I am so very glad that you're here, so thanks for being here. My name's Colby. Let's get comfy and talk about Dungeons & Dragons really quick. If you would like a written step-by-step guide to this build and all of the other builds that I make on this channel, or if you're just simply looking for a way to support the channel a little bit more than you're already doing, like financially, I would appreciate it if you would consider joining as a member. There should be a little button down there, and for like $2 a month, you get access to the library of write-ups that I make for each of these builds that give you kind of a step-by-step cheat sheet on recreating them so that you don't have to go back and rewatch the video or take notes, etc. It's just a nice little way to support me in the channel and help me create more and better content. So huge thanks to all of my channel members. Love you guys. And for everybody else, I love you too. You're awesome. Thank you for being here, for watching, liking, subscribing, commenting. All of those things also are great ways to support the channel, and I appreciate them, and I appreciate you. Right. So for those who don't know, there is a lot of talk going on in the D&D tubes and nets about the way that Wizards of the Coast, hereafter referred to as WotC, are supposedly nerfing or gutting martial characters. That is, characters who are primarily weapon users, not spellcasters, right? In the next version of D&D, currently known as 1D&D. 1D&D set to come out sometime in 2024, much of which is being playtested at the moment. Most people, though, seem to argue already that today, in 5th edition of D&D 5e, spellcasters are already significantly more powerful than martial weapon-focused characters, and that the unearthed arcana that WotC has put out so far for 1D&D shows that the gap between martials and spellcasters is only going to get bigger. Here's the problem with making that argument today in November 2022. There are just so many things that we don't yet know about WotC's plans for 1D&D. We've seen some rules come out to be tested. Some of those rules have already been changed since playtesting. And we've seen 3 classes, right? The expert classes, Rogue, Ranger, Bard, with 1 subclass each. We don't know what weapon damage is going to look like yet in 1D&D. We don't know what spell damage looks like yet. Most of the classes haven't been shown to us in Unearthed Arcana form, let alone all of their subclasses. And also, perhaps most importantly, this is still Unearthed Arcana, which means it's essentially in beta mode or test mode, right? And tons of stuff is going to change between now and a year and a half from now when it releases. For that reason, sure, let's absolutely give feedback to WotC. But as my friend Chris over at Treant Monk's Temple has been saying for quite a while now, I think, we can probably all simmer down a skosh until we have a little more detail on the things that WotC is going to be changing, right? Now, of all the classes in the game that WotC have shown us thus far, perhaps the one that is resulting in the biggest outcry is the Rogue. I love rogues. I played a rogue main for many years in World of Warcraft. I really love being stealthy and sneaky and doing big, huge damage with a well-placed blade in the back. Oh, that's a little dark, Colby. Don't you mean you love playing characters who can do that sort of thing? But yes, one change that is apparently coming to rogues is that sneak attack is being changed so that instead of working once on a turn, as is currently worded in 5e, 1D&D thus far lists it as working once on your turn. Now, a lot of people have not really known that sneak attack could even be used more than once a round, and it seems quite possible that based on this change, that it was the designer's intent all along to only allow it once per round. I certainly hope not, personally, but yeah. Regardless of their intent, however, as most of you know, I'm sure, if for no other reason than because you've been watching this channel for a while, yes, in the current version of the game, if you can get an attack on another character's turn, as a rogue, namely using your reaction, then yes, you can use sneak attack another time in a round potentially. And yes, of course, this is something that we have tried to take advantage of with several different builds, most recently the Berserker Lurker. And you know what? Today, we're going to do it again. Because here's the thing, and this, I think, is the reason that so many people are up in arms about the change to sneak attack in the Unearthed Arcana for 1D&D. As is, in 5e, rogues are pretty subpar damage-wise when compared to other martial characters, or at least compared to other martial characters who have been built with a little bit of optimization or min-maxing in mind, right? While other martial characters get easy access to fighting styles, extra attack, and other things like rage, reckless attack, or spells at a half-caster rate, smites, extra attack. The only thing rogues really get to scale their damage is sneak attack. And it scales at a fairly modest 1d6 of damage every 2 rogue levels. Right now, if we can come up with some clever and often resource-intensive ways to get sneak attack twice in a round, the reality is we still are often just barely keeping up with characters who might be, say, making 3 attacks per turn with a plus 10 damage bonus from Great Weapon Master, right? Now, the good news is that feats like Great Weapon Master and Sharpshooter are, in the current 1D&D Unearthed Arcana, a lot less powerful. Is that good news? Some would say no. So maybe, just maybe, rogue damage will be a little more in line with other martial characters once all is said and done, even if this nerf to sneak attack holds. That's my hope. And maybe spells and spellcasters will similarly be brought in line with the power level of non-spellcasting classes. Or maybe all of the feedback that we are giving to WotC about the change to sneak attack will convince them to continue to allow it to happen once on a turn instead of on your turn. But even if those hopes prove to be futile, we still have a good year and a half before 1D&D comes out. So let's go ahead and make hay while the sun shines and build another rogue who can use sneak attack twice in a round, because it's fun and it's powerful and I love it. A quick word of warning, while I do envision this build and this character as mostly a rogue, it takes them a while to get to mostly a rogue due to the importance of a particular spell that I need to make the tactic that I have in mind work. So, in a low-level campaign, they're going to have more levels in another class than they will in rogue. Still, I'm going to build them to be able to fulfill those important utility rogue abilities of stealth, lockpicking, etc. right from the get-go. And then focus on rogue more later once we get that aforementioned spell. This character is going to be built for nova damage or burst damage, but I think one of their greatest strengths will be how well-rounded they'll be, since they're going to have strong burst, but also decent sustained damage, loads of great utility, and even some nice support options to boot. Alright, no more preamble. I proudly present episode 117, The Quickened Blade. Check out this fantastic artwork by my good friend Randall Hampton, who created this piece based on the concept that I sent him. He does this every week. He's amazing. You already know that. If you would like to follow him, to check out the other stuff that he has created, or to potentially try and commission him to create some artwork for you or your party, I will, as always, put links in the video description. Thanks, Randall. And also, before jumping into the build, I wanted to share a quick word about a new sponsor for the video this week. It's a new 5e adventure campaign by Quest Nest called The Divine Forge, Well of the Aether. The Divine Forge is going to be a 250-page book filled with lots of really cool locations, magic items, spells, and of course really great NPCs and enemies that make up the adventure, all of which could be plugged into your own different adventure if you really wanted to. But as for the adventure itself, it looks really cool. The Divine Forge takes place in the province of Talus, with your heroes embroiled in a war with the undead. From there, things unfold, and before long you will find yourself fighting against cultists attempting to create a blood elemental, or planning a prisoner escape from a stronghold held by drow and a hobgoblin wizard, where they are testing aether-forged weapons on the innocent, trying to stop a green dragon who is attempting to accelerate their aging in order to become more powerful. That's a cool concept, right? You want to move from young all the way up to ancient. You want to get there in a hurry. And ultimately, attempting to destroy the Divine Forge itself. Though you'll have to get past more undead, dryaders, and a drow warlock priestess along the way to doing so. If any of this sounds as fun to play to you as it does to me, then you should absolutely check out the Kickstarter for the Divine Forge right now, because the Kickstarter launched today. I'm going to put the link in the video description, of course, for how to get there and support this project. As I'm sure you know, backing a project when it's in Kickstarter will give you access to lots of cool perks that you can't get otherwise if you just buy it after publication, right? So take advantage. I can't wait to see the finished product here. I know it's going to be fantastic. So big thanks to QuestNest. I'm sure you're going to blow past those funding goals. And let's jump into the build. All right, at level 1. Like I said, my intent with this character is to be able to fill the roguish utility for my party as best as I can right from the get-go. So yes, this means starting as a rogue at level 1. So I can get as many skill proficiencies as possible. For one thing, you get one more skill proficiency if you start rogue rather than if you multi-class into them later, right? And also to make sure we start off with all those important tools like expertise right from the inception so that I can be a good scout, stealthy, lockpicker, trap disarmer, right? As for our race, I might surprise you here. We're gonna go with Goblin. I myself am a little surprised, if I'm being honest. You know, I've been wanting to do a goblin character ever since Monsters of the Multiverse Mom came out a few months ago. The idea of playing this small, potentially furious goblin feels really cool and frankly pretty roguey. Not only that, but the thing that might have pushed me over the edge, convincing me to use them for this particular character build, might have been the amazing artwork for the goblin that came out with Mom. It looks totally like a perfect spellcasty gishy rogue. Yeah, short blade in one hand, magical staff or spear in the other. Looks amazing. I love that. But mechanically, the thing that makes Goblin so great for this build is the Fury of the Small feature that they get. Fury of the Small tells us that proficiency bonus times per day when we do damage with a spell or an attack and the creature's size is at least one bigger than our own, and since we're small sized, that should be most enemies that we fight in the game, we can do extra damage equal to our proficiency bonus. Now, the thing about this damage is that we can only use it once per turn. Oh ho ho, do you see what I see? Do you see what I see? Not once on your turn, but once per turn. So, if I'm building a Nova damage character who's intending to do damage on our turn and on someone else's, what better time to go Goblin and double up on that Fury of the Small damage as well, yeah? As for our ability scores, I assume we're going the point buy method as always and would suggest starting with a 15 dexterity and taking our +2 from our racial there, a 15 constitution, taking our +1 there, and then a 14 charisma. I was sorely tempted to go 15 in each and do a +1 in each, giving us 3 16s in our 3 most important ability scores for this character. I wouldn't fault you for doing that. Going the way I did will give us just a teeny bit more damage later, and since I'm a slave to the spreadsheet, I made that choice. But if I were playing this character in game, I think I might go 3 16s. At least going 15, 15, 14, we can get our wisdom to a 10 to keep our wisdom saving throws and skills from having a negative modifier. As for equipment, I recommend taking the gold buy method, as I often do, and would say let's grab studded leather, a rapier, thieves tools, and whatever else you can afford. I think it's silly that no class starts with studded leather as a potential starting armor option. It's only 45 gold, it's not all that expensive. Anyway, as a rogue at level 1, we get Thieves' Cant, which is the special coded language that rogues and thieves can use to communicate with each other in written form. And then yes, we get Expertise, which lets us double our proficiency bonus in 2 skills that we're proficient in or 1 skill and thieves' tools. And yeah, I think if it were me trying to be the best rogue I could be, I'd probably go stealth and thieves' tools here. Those seem to be the most oft called for checks when you're trying to be sneaky and scouty and disarm traps, etc. You might opt for perception or sleight of hand or investigation. Those are all decent options here too, I think, especially with our low intelligence and wisdom scores. But then we also get sneak attack, of course, which tells us that once on a turn, so long as the enemy that we are attacking is next to one of our allies or we have advantage on the attack, and so long as we're making the attack with a finesse or a ranged weapon, hence the rapier, we can add an extra 1d6 of damage to the attack, and of course that scales with rogue levels. But at level 2, with those very important proficiencies, expertise, and sneak attack secured by starting rogue, it's time for us to beeline to our all-important spell. So, it turns out that though when we first meet our champion, they are perhaps a little bit more of a run-of-the-mill goblin, sneaky, tricksy, great at sticking a blade in just the right spot, they have discovered something more than just stealth and fury within themselves. Perhaps they were converted by other goblins to become a disciple of Quickened, the good and nurturing goddess of the desert goblins, or bukas. Better yet, perhaps you are a descendant of a demigod who was a scion or a mouthpiece of Quickened herself, and the magic that runs through your veins as part of that lineage has now begun to manifest itself in you, calling you to be something more, something greater than just a sneak thief. You are determined to use your newfound power and natural panache to persuade others to do good and to strike down those who would harm the weak and the small. Whatever your reasons, we are, yes, going to take some Sorcerer levels now. And my original plan actually was to start Sorcerer because they get Constitution saving throw proficiency, and thus we'd get a big bump to our Constitution saves and our concentration checks. But like I said, I wanted to be a really good rogue right from the beginning, and I knew we'd be delaying our rogue levels for a long time once we started Sorcerer. Plus, I really wanted rapier proficiency, and multiclassing into rogue after starting with something else wouldn't have got us any roguish weapon proficiencies, and I didn't want to be stuck with a dagger the whole time. Plus, I liked the story better starting rogue, so here we are. And as a Sorcerer 1, we get right from the beginning our Sorcerer subclass, our Sorceress origin. And I'm gonna go with Divine Soul, I think. Divine Soul, probably my favorite Sorcerer subclass. I suppose I kind of just really like a dash of religion in my characters, but I also really love the features they get right at level 1. That said, if you'd rather go a different route, I think Wild Magic might actually be a decent option, both mechanically for the once per short rest, or sometimes more often, advantage you can get on an attack, but also thematically, as a trickster-like character just kind of seems like a perfect fit for the chaos and hilarity that often results from Wild Magic shenanigans, right? And probably the main reason that I wanted to go with Divine Soul here is for the feature that Divine Soul Sorcerers get right at level 1, favored by the gods. This feature tells us that once per short rest, if we fail a saving throw or miss an attack, we can add 2d4 to the check, potentially changing the outcome. And 2d4 is just a huge boost. That's a +5 on average, right? And I love that we get to decide to do it after we've failed, so we can have a pretty good idea if 2d4 is going to turn that failure into a success. Now, it's possible that only a great fool would use this for an attack roll rather than a super important saving throw, but you must have known I was a great fool. You would have counted on it, so I can clearly not choose the wine in front of me. Can't stop, won't stop. Right. Great fool that I am. Yes, when I crunch the numbers, I am going to assume that we're using this on one of our attacks, our most important, highest damage attack. Go ahead and be smarter than me if you would prefer. The other really quite amazing feature that Divine Soul Sorcerers get, though, at level 1 is Divine Magic, which not only gives you a free cleric spell based on your alignment, but then incredibly tells us that we basically get access to the entire cleric spell list in addition to the sorcerer spell list. That makes for a really fantastic spell list. I might even argue the best spell list out there for a single subclass. Wizard fans angry, Clockwork Soul Sorcerers more angry. So, speaking of spells, which spells should we get here at Sorcerer 1? I'd probably grab Firebolt or Ice Lance for a decent ranged attack option. Of course, you could always just throw daggers or darts or carry a crossbow. Because yeah, keep in mind that our charisma modifier is pretty mediocre and will be for pretty much our entire career. So generally speaking, the spells we take should be ones that work regardless of our spellcasting modifier, right? That means mostly support and utility stuff. Guidance is a fantastic little buff spell. Message is useful for telepathic communication, especially if you might often be scouting ahead for your party. Healing Word, of course, is a super powerful way to bring your enemies back from unconscious, from range, with a bonus action. Shield, a fantastic defensive buff. I'm probably using my concentration for Bless right now, unless someone else in the party is already doing so, giving 3 party members a d4 to add to all of their attacks and saving throws, can include us as well, of course, one of the best buffs in game. But the most important spell for us to take here for our damage, anyway, is Booming Blade. As a quick reminder, with Booming Blade, you make a weapon attack as part of the casting of the spell, and yes, we can apply sneak attack damage to a Booming Blade attack, since sneak attack doesn't ever say that the attack has to be made as part of the attack action, right? Only that the attack has to be made with a ranged or finesse weapon, etc., etc. If you hit with Booming Blade, you do some extra damage on the attack itself, after character 5 at least, when the cantrip starts to scale, and then more damage if the enemy willingly moves before your next turn. Both of these things are going to be really important for us, eventually, anyway. At level 3, we would be a Sorcerer 2, and we get Font of Magic. These are our sorcery points. We get 1 sorcery point per Sorcerer level. We recover them on a long rest. We can sacrifice our spell slots to create more points, and can use those points to either create more spell slots or to fuel our meta magic options, though we don't get meta magic until next level. So yes, at level 4, we'd be Sorcerer 3, and we get meta magic. Let's discuss that. Meta magic allows us to pick 2 meta magic options from my really lovely list, and these are all things that enhance our spells in some way. I'm going to take Quickened Spell, as I pretty much always do, which tells us that we can spend 2 sorcery points to cast a spell that normally has a casting time of 1 action as a bonus action instead. I love Quickened Spell with all of my heart. As for the other options we should take, I'm just going to say, pick your favorite PYF, but I think I'd personally go with Subtle Spell here on this character, if for no other reason than it just seems like the right thematic choice for a roguish character. But it lets you, for just 1 sorcery point, cast a spell without verbal or somatic components. This can come in handy for getting a spell off without being seen, so you can't be countered, or maybe from stealth so that you're not heard and you maintain surprise, but could also be used to, say, cast the shield spell if your hands were full of weapons or a weapon and a shield, which I'm not planning on doing on this character, at least not yet, but you might have built the character slightly differently, and if so, it'd be good to have if you didn't have the Warcaster feat, right? And yes, as a Sorcerer 3, we get 2nd level spells here. So many fantastic spells available to us with access to both the Sorcerer and Cleric spell lists. Nothing that I'd necessarily plan on using to increase our damage, but I'd grab Aid to bolster 3 party members' maximum hit points, a really nice support spell. Misty Step, because teleportation is almost always handy. And then I'd even consider other things like invisibility when you really need to make sure that you succeed on your stealth checks and or want to make sure you get surprise on an enemy. Lesser Restoration's a really nice way to cure a lot of crappy conditions. Mirror Image for a fun and tricksy defensive illusion. Spider Climb can come in handy. Vortex Warp to move an ally or an enemy even, an impressive 90 feet. Shadow Blade might be worth considering here to use your concentration on for a short time, especially if you're in dim light or darkness, for that advantage that it grants. I'm not building around Shadow Blade on this particular character, so go ahead and pick your favorite. At level 5, we would be a Sorcerer 4, and we get an ability score increase or feat. And I'm gonna say with a little bit of reservation that we should take the Piercer feat. As I often say when I take this feat, I don't really love the Piercer feat. And why do you keep taking it? It's decent on builds that are looking to really maximize critical hits, but otherwise it just gives us a very moderate damage increase, and we're building for damage, so I'm going Piercer. It's a half feat, which is really one of the main reasons for taking it. It lets us get to an 18 dexterity, right? But then it also lets us re-roll one of our attack's damage dice once per turn, so long as the attack does piercing damage. And keep in mind that sneak attack damage does simply adopt the damage type of the weapon. So both the rapier damage dice and the sneak attack damage dice are doing piercing damage here. Note that yes, this is also a once per turn feature, not once on your turn. So though the damage bump is small, at least for this character, we're going to be able to take advantage of it twice in a round, right? My friend Preston, who plays a rogue in our Tales of Veneria campaign, has taken the Piercer feat and is becoming famous for like rolling a 1 on sneak attack, re-rolling that 1, and just getting another 1, like basically every single time. It's very Will Wheaton-esque. Also, with Piercer, when you get a critical hit with piercing damage, you can roll 1 extra damage die for the crit. So 3d8s instead of 2 for us in that case, right, with the rapier. Again, the feat just brings a very small damage increase, but it is an increase nonetheless. Don't forget that at character level 5 here, Booming Blade now does an extra 1d8 of damage on the attack and 2d8 of damage if the character moves before our next turn. At level 6, we get 3rd level spells. And yeah, of course, you should take Revivify. Having Resurrection in case of emergency on your Sorcerer Rogue especially is fantastic ace up your sleeve. Blink is a really great non-concentration defensive buff, letting you potentially blink sort of in and out of the battlefield and often avoid a lot of damage. Catnap is wonderful for a quick short rest in a pinch. Fly is infinitely useful. Motivational Speech is a really nice temporary hit point buff for your entire party. And who wouldn't want to have a Fireball to pull out in just the right situation? But the most important spell of all for us at this level is, yes, the haste spell. It's the thing that makes our little character concept work as well as it does. Haste costs an action to cast and requires our concentration, so no more bless, unfortunately, but it gives us a lot of fantastic buffs. A +2 to our armor class, advantage on dexterity saving throws, double our move speed, and above all, an extra action on our turn that can be used to dash, disengage, hide, use an object, or take the attack action. Though this attack action is limited to 1 weapon attack only, which is fine for us, we didn't have extra attack anyway. One big downside to haste though. When the spell ends, you can't move or take actions until after your next turn. Yikes. Losing concentration just got a lot more painful and might make you seriously rethink starting Sorcerer or taking Resilient Constitution last level instead of Piercer, right? Beware. I don't mind playing a high-risk, high-reward playstyle. I think it kind of adds some excitement and fun to the game, but yeah, losing concentration is going to be really punishing if we've got haste on ourselves. But yeah, I like to throw caution to the wind because at level 6, it's time for our first damage report. So let's talk about what combat looks like for us right now. On round 1, you're going to use your action to cast haste on yourself and then take that extra action granted to make a weapon attack with your rapier and add sneak attack damage. Round 2 is when we go Nova. You find the most important or perhaps vulnerable target, run up to them, and use Quickened spell to cast Booming Blade as a bonus action, making a weapon attack along with the d8 of Booming Blade damage. Then, thanks to haste, we get to make a weapon attack with our rapier. Whichever of those attacks hits first, we'll add both our d6 of sneak attack damage plus 3 more for Fury of the Small. With our regular, non-hasted, like normal action that we haven't used yet, we will simply be readying our action. Quick reminder, this means we can ready an action that triggers when a predetermined thing happens. When that predetermined trigger later happens, we use our reaction to do the thing that we said we were going to do. And yeah, we used this to pretty nice effect in our Bardic Brawler build just last week. For us here, the readied action will simply be to cast Booming Blade on our current target. The trigger might simply be right after my turn is over, or if that's too cheesy, maybe after a 6-second pause, or when my target looks like they're about to move or attack, etc. Work this out with your DM beforehand to make sure that this is not going to be a conflict at your table. But then once that trigger happens, we use our reaction to cast Booming Blade, and since it's a different character's turn now, we apply not only the Rapier and Booming Blade damage, but the Sneak Attack and Fury of the Small damage again as well for a second helping. happy days. By the way, I'm going to assume that we are using Favor of the Gods on that reaction attack to make sure it lands so that we can get the most out of it. Just exploring best case scenario numbers as always, not advising you to necessarily do this. Anyway, altogether, if every hit lands, we would be doing 3d8 for 3 rapier attacks plus 2d6 for 2 applications of sneak attack, 2d8 more for 2 helpings of Booming Blade, 6 for 2 helpings of Fury of the Small, and 12 for our dexterity modifier on those 3 attacks that we're getting, for a grand total of 5d8 plus 2d6 plus 18. And thus, against an enemy with a 10 armor class, on average, we would be doing 49 damage during our Nova round here. And against a 15 armor class, it would be 41 damage. And so, okay, for a Nova damage build, that's not amazing. It's about the middle of the pack of tier 3 when you compare it to other burst damage builds that I've done to date at this level. Check the video description for spreadsheets and graphs showing you those comparisons and numbers. But here's the nice thing. Once you've got haste up, you can do this readied action technique every single round, potentially. You use your hasted action for a single weapon attack, adding sneak attack damage if it hits, and ready your regular action to cast Booming Blade later on in the round, doing sneak attack damage again. Now, this sustained DPR that would result isn't particularly spectacular either compared to other sustained DPR builds at this level. 27 DPR versus 10 armor class and 20 DPR versus 15 armor class. Damage per round DPR. And that's kind of near the bottom of tier 4 for sustained damage builds, but hey, at least making the list on both burst and sustained damage is pretty unique and a happy place to be. And on top of it all, of course, we're bringing some really great roguish utility and cleric-like support capabilities. We are already super well-rounded, very effective. I love it. At level 7, with our all-important haste spell secured and a few sorcery points for Quickened Spell under our belt, I think it's time to go back to Rogue. It looks like our path has led us to embrace the stealthy and subtle talents we inherited and or fostered in our youth, as that, it turns out, is the way that we can best help strike at Kikanudi's enemies, or those who seek to harm the ones that we are trying to protect. So yes, as a Rogue 2 now, we get Cunning Action, which tells us that as a bonus action we can take the hide, dash, or disengage actions, which is kind of a bit of a bummer because goblins innately get the nimble escape feature, which lets us hide or disengage as a bonus action. Meaning this is largely redundant, though adding dash to the options that we have is nice. Hey, at least we've been able to do the other 2 for the first 6 levels of our character's career, right? At level 8, we would be a Rogue 3, and this means that first up, sneak attack damage bumps to 2d6, which of course means 4d6 per round for us, generally, if we're getting sneak attack off with a readied action every round, right? And then, yes, we get our roguish archetype, our rogue subclass. And we are going to go with Swashbuckler. And this is where the build for me kind of finally feels complete. Swashbuckler is super perfect for what we're trying to do here. Plus, I really love the personality of a swashbuckler rogue, especially on a goblin. Charismatic, wily, a charming scoundrel. But let's get into the mechanics of the decision here. So first off, as a swashbuckler, we get Rakish Audacity, which tells us that we get to add our charisma modifier to our initiative rolls. That's fantastic. It's only a +2, but we'll take it. Perhaps more importantly, we can now trigger our sneak attack so long as we're within 5 feet of the enemy and no other creature is within 5 feet of us. So yeah, you really should be getting sneak attack constantly and consistently on this character. We are a true dueling specialist now. But not only that, we also get fancy footwork here. And this tells us that if we make a melee attack against a creature, then they can't take opportunity attacks against us for the rest of our turn. So from this point on, we're going to get a nice potential bump to our damage during our Nova round at least. Remember, we are on our Nova round quickening the Booming Blade spell on our enemy. Now we can move away from them without taking an opportunity attack and just kind of tease them to chase after us. If and when they do, they're going to take that extra 2d8 of Booming Blade damage for moving. So yes, ideally we want to be attacking a melee enemy who will be forced to move to get into range to attack anyone. Now, of course, they might decide to just stand there doing nothing, if they somehow know that they're going to take damage if they move, but if so, that's a huge win for us, right? At this point, your readied action might change to as soon as an enemy gets within 5 feet of me, for example, just in case that enemy that we initially targeted runs away from you instead of towards you, but maybe another creature comes up to try and hit you, for example. Regardless, most importantly, be sure that your allies know what you're trying to do here so that they don't run up to that enemy that you've hit with Booming Blade and thereby give that enemy someone else to attack without having to move, right? Now, I appreciate that this won't work every single time. You might only have a single enemy to fight on this combat encounter, or the enemies that are there might be already standing next to one of your allies, or, you might be fighting in a really crowded room, but when it does work, it'll be super potent and lots of fun. At level 9, we would be a Rogue 4, and we get another ability score increase or feat. Honestly, we should probably get Resilient Constitution here if you didn't start as Sorcerer or didn't take it last time, but screw it. We've got a damage report coming. I'm going to bump Dexterity. So I can cap it at 20 because it's the best thing that we can do for our damage. You go the smart route. So yeah, level 9, time for our next damage report. Since last check, we have capped our dexterity score against our better judgment, gained 1d6 to our sneak attack damage, gained 1 to Fury of the Small damage, and gained 2d8 from Booming Blade once per round, assuming that our enemy now has to move on their turn. And so, against an enemy with a 10 armor class, we would on average now do 72 damage during our Nova round, and against an enemy with a 16 armor class, it would be 61 damage. And yeah, compared to other Nova damage builds that I've done to date at this level, that's kind of near the bottom of tier 3. We've slipped a little, we haven't scaled quite as much as those other builds, but we still bring all the great utility and support that we brought before with decent sustained damage to boot. I am really quite pleased with where we're at. At level 10, we would be a Rogue 5. This means that our sneak attack damage goes up to 3d6, which again would be 6d6 per round for us if we're using our reaction for it, but doing so would mean that we would not get to take advantage of the pretty nice Uncanny Dodge feature that we get at Rogue 5. And that's kind of a bummer. Uncanny Dodge lets us use our reaction to have the damage of any attack against us so long as we can see it. And that can be a pretty big lifesaver sometimes. You might at this point want to start being a little more strategic in your held action usage from this point forward, depending on what you're up against and how close you are to death. At level 11, we would be a Rogue 6, and we get Expertise Part 2. More expertise, always great. Assuming we went Stealth and Thieves' Tools last time, I'd probably go Perception and either Investigation or Sleight of Hand right now, or maybe even Acrobatics in case of grapples. Take your favorites here and what you think will be most fun and powerful. Don't forget, very importantly, that Booming Blade scales here at character level 11 too. 2d8 damage now on a hit and 3d8 damage if they move. That's going to be a pretty nice damage bump for us, especially since we're hitting twice with Booming Blade on our Nova round, and hopefully getting them to move as well. At level 12, we would be a Rogue 7, and first up, Sneak Attack goes to 4d6, which is 8d6 per round for us, if things go according to plan, and we get Evasion. And that makes me really glad that Haste gives us advantage on our dexterity saving throws, and that we have proficiency in those saving throws, because with Evasion, if we have to make a dexterity save against something to avoid taking full damage, but we take half damage instead, like Fireball, for example, we now would take half damage if we fail and no damage if we succeed. And honestly, we're just not going to fail on dexterity saving throws from this point on. And you know what? For as much as we in the D&D optimizer community like to talk about the importance of Constitution and Wisdom saving throws, keep in mind that Dexterity is the most common saving throw that the existing spells in D&D 5e call for. Now, of course, usually the ones calling for a Constitution or Wisdom save are often more problematic than just you take more damage if you fail your save. But hey, I'm trying to put my glass half full spin on things here, so don't cramp my style. Now, at level 13, I think our hero has become inspired by a party member who is particularly brave. or maybe especially martially skilled. And we want to learn from them for just a little bit because, yeah, we're going to take some fighter levels here. There's that fighter dip that he takes in almost every single Nova build that he does. I knew it was in here somewhere. You, of course, do not have to take this detour. If you want to just really get as much out of your sneak attack damage and keep beelining to those higher level rogue abilities, or maybe even try to go for 4th level sorcerer spells and more and better spell slots, either route is fine, I think. Getting fighter levels is going to do more for our damage, frankly, especially on our Nova round, and honestly, if you're going to do this and take some fighter levels, I would seriously consider starting with a level of fighter so you can get both constitution saving throw proficiency and rapier proficiency, and maybe even consider equipping a shield throughout your career for better survivability. Though spellcasting might get a little tricky at that point unless you pick up Warcaster. Starting fighter 1 is probably what I would do if I were playing this character in game, but I couldn't start fighter 1, have some roguish utility and sneak attack, and the haste spell by our first damage report at level 6 if I started fighter, so I opted to go rogue then sorcerer. You do you. For this build, getting to evasion and 4d6 on our sneak attack felt like the right time for me to take a fighter dip, but really any time earlier after getting haste wouldn't necessarily be wrong either, I don't think. Anyway, we're here now, and yes, as a fighter 1, we get second wind. That lets us heal ourselves a little bit as a bonus action once per short rest, and then we get a fighting style. Defense would not be a bad option to give us a bump to our armor class, but for damage purposes, I'm going to take the dueling fighting style, which would give us an extra 2 damage to each of our rapier attacks. It's not a ton, but on our Nova round, we are making 3 attacks total, and soon it'll be more. And 6 damage is almost as good as like 2d6, right? It's not nothing. But yes, at level 13, it is time for our next damage report, and since our last check, we've added a d8 to Booming Blade on both the hit and on the move. We've added 2d6 more damage to our sneak attack, 1 more to Fury of the Small, and now 2 more damage to each rapier attack thanks to the dueling fighting style. Not to mention some really nice utility and defensive features to boot. And thus, against an enemy with a 10 armor class on average, during our Nova round here we would do 107 damage, and against a 17 armor class it would be 95. Alright, we broke the century mark, if barely. But yeah, compared to other Nova damage builds I've done to date, we're still kind of right near the bottom of the pile at this level. Still bringing a lot more to the table than just our burst damage. But that damage itself is good, not amazing. But you know what? We are more well-rounded than most, if not all, of the other Nova builds that I've done, making us very, very strong, all told. At level 14, we would be a fighter 2, and yes, that means we get action surge, and yes, that's the main reason I wanted to go fighter. With action surge, once per short rest, we can take 2 actions on our turn instead of 1. So at this point, during our Nova round, we would Quicken Booming Blade, use our action to Booming Blade again, take our extra rapier attack from haste, and then action surge and ready that extra action for the reaction Booming Blade attack, right? With Booming Blade having scaled as nicely as it has, getting 1 more Booming Blade attack per round is really nice, considering also that it's going to give us 1 more chance to land our sneak attack on our turn, and yeah, add our dexterity modifier, our dueling damage to that attack as well. But at level 15, I think we've learned what we wanted from our fighter friend, and we just go back to rogue here for the rest of our career. That means we'd be a rogue 8, and we get another ability score increase or feat. And honestly, if you haven't taken Resilient Constitution by this point, you might be a crazy person. But also, you might want to just settle for Warcaster instead, since going fighter let us get shield proficiency, and thus with Warcaster we could cast spells with our hands full and get advantage on our concentration checks. Of course, you could always do both to really solidify those concentration checks. And considering how terribly punishing losing our concentration on haste will be, that's probably not a bad idea. The only other alternative I'd maybe consider here would probably be just straight up bumping my constitution for better hit points and saves. But yeah, I think Resilient Con and Warcaster take priority here. And hey, if you're gonna take Resilient Con earlier on in the build, feel free to leave your constitution at an odd number, right? Because it does give us a +1 to our constitution score as well. At level 16, we would be a rogue 9, and that means sneak attack gets another bump up to 5d6 or 10d6 a round for us, potentially. And then as a swashbuckler, we get the panache feature. With panache, you can use your action to make a persuasion check against an enemy's insight check, and if you succeed, so long as they can hear you and they share a language with you, then they have disadvantage on attacks against anyone other than you for 1 minute. Unless one of your allies attacks them, or affects them with a spell, or they move 60 feet away from you. That is a terrible feature. I know. Some of you are thinking that maybe you could build a swashbuckler tank around this feature. But, I mean, you don't get it until character level 9, first of all. So maybe if you were starting a character at like level 9 or later. But then it requires a charisma check in what would at best be my secondary, if not tertiary, ability score. And it can be broken and fail in a myriad of ways. Come on, Blizzard. I mean, Wizards. Okay, fine. There is some out-of-combat utility here too. With Panache, if a creature is not hostile to you, you can charm them for 1 minute if you succeed on your check. Which means they can't hurt you, they think of you as a friendly acquaintance, and you get advantage on social interactions with them. I'm still going with meh. But at level 17, we would be a rogue 10, and yeah, rogues get a bonus ability score increase or feat at rogue 10, which is nice. I'm probably going to go with whichever defensive feat I didn't take last time, Warcaster, Resilient Constitution, or maybe potentially bumping Constitution at this point. And then, yes, Booming Blade gets our final increase here, scaling to 3d8 on a hit and 4d8 if they move. And so, for our final damage report, since last check, we have added yet another d6 to our sneak attack, another d8 to each Booming Blade attack, as well as a d8 if they move, one more damage to Fury of the Small, and probably most importantly, Action Surge, which will give us another Booming Blade attack on our Nova round. We have also added a lot of nice defensive features via our feats and a wee bit of utility with Panache. But against an enemy with a 10 armor class here, we would on average do 156 damage during our Nova round, and against an enemy with an 18 armor class, it would be 132 damage on average. And that is actually a nice increase. It moves us back to like the middle of tier 3 compared to other Nova builds at this level. And yeah, with everything else we bring to the table, we're in a really, really great place. And so, let's discuss final thoughts. The tier score for this character, if you take the damage that they do at each of the armor classes that we account for at each of the 4 damage reports, and just average them all together into one number, we end up with a 75. And that puts us in, the bottom half of tier 3 compared to other Nova builds, just above the Whippoorwill and barely below the Thunderball Secret Agent build. So on the one hand, we've kinda sorta made the point, right? That allowing rogues to do sneak attack damage twice on a turn is not particularly overpowered, at least not in the current state of the game. That said, if you really wanted to build a character who excelled at burst damage with this tactic, the Swashbuckler Nova I built a while back does a fair bit better. I don't know if I have any cards left to link to it, but if I do, there it is. Their tier score was 100, so 33% higher. Or if you wanted to use this tactic for better sustained damage, at least on one entire combat encounter per long rest, the more recent Berserker Lurker build that I linked to at the beginning of the show did really quite well, making it into the upper half of tier 1 for our sustained DPR builds. But that build was also a strength-based rogue, right? And so not as strong at all of the roguish utility that this character is bringing. And that sort of segues into like my main point, I suppose. The real beauty of the Quickened Blade isn't that they're just amazing at burst necessarily, but that they bring strong burst and decent sustained damage and great utility and decent support all rolled into one character. I mean, not only that, but honestly, they're pretty durable to boot, especially by the end here. Assuming that we just have like non-magical studded leather, a non-magical shield, a 20 dexterity with haste up, we're sitting at a 21 armor class. And then we've got evasion, access to uncanny dodge, though admittedly we might not be using it all that often. The shield spell, which is huge, and probably an 18 constitution by the end. We're among the tankier rogues that you're gonna find. So at the end of the day, yes, I'll admit it. I personally hope that Wizards of the Coast reverses the decision to only allow sneak attack once on my turn. My thoughts on that might change after we see everything else that they're planning on doing for 1D&D, but I kinda doubt it. Because if nothing else, in the end, I think rewarding players for clever and thoughtful tactics is pretty much always a really good idea. And finding ways to get sneak attack multiple times in a round is clever and thoughtful, and not cheap either, right? It costs us our reaction every single time we do it, which means no uncanny dodge, and it's also going to cost us several levels in another class, unless somebody else is casting the haste spell on us, or a battle master is giving us a reaction attack or something, right? Plus, for us, on this build, our highest level spell slots. But until that 1D&D change comes to sneak attack, if it comes, I would love to play this character, because I think it would just feel super useful and powerful in pretty much every situation. And that's also a really good thing. I mean, I guess I better play it sooner rather than later, before those unearthed arcana propositions become the reality in the next version, right? The clock's a ticking. But anyway, that's the build for the week. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I enjoyed creating it. I hope you guys know how much I love you. I do. You're awesome. Thank you for all that you do for me, for the channel. I hope you'll check out the other content in the channel if you're not currently in the habit of doing so. But above all, I hope that you have a really great day and a fantastic week, and that I see you again super soon, and that you be kind and good and stay safe. But until next time, take care. Bye. And I think it's gonna be a long, long time till touchdown brings me round again to find I'm not the man they think I am at all. Oh no, 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 I'm a rocket man. Rocket man, burning all the things I've ever known. What does he say there? I have no idea. Let's look it up. You guys, it is snowing outside. We're getting our first snow of the season here in Utah. I just had to make myself a little hot cocoa. And dream of rogues and spells and sneak attack damage. Burning out his fuse up here alone. All right. Rocket Man, burning up his fuse. I still can't get it right. I love hygge. Am I saying that right, Scandinavians out there? Hygge? I think that's right. Anyway, I love it. Rocket Man, burning out his fuse up here alone. And I think it's gonna be a long, long time. And I think it's gonna be a long, long time. Any fans of the Dua Lipa version of that song? My wife loves it. She can't get enough. But every time she listens to it, I just want to listen to the original, because nobody does it better than Elton. It's not hot chocolate anymore. It's just like chocolate milk, which actually is not a bad thing either. Let it snow, let it snow, let it snow. Grogu approved. Don't even say that, because I don't know what changed. Don't say that. Don't say that. Well, no, not even on or over round. Don't say that. Or not, don't say that. Well, don't say that. Well, don't say that.